Here's an example of why baseline is important. So the situation is, this is a high school I was at a couple years ago. We're all sitting around Thomas Edison's IEP, discussing his social skill deficits and trying to generate good IEP goals to improve these skills. What does Thomas Edison need to learn socially in high school? He's in grade 9. The best social opportunity in high school is the cafeteria at lunchtime. They have a traditional cafeteria with the food and everything. And this is where all the kids get together and they're away from the adults and they're talking and they're doing their things at their table. In classrooms isn't really the best social time. Even if they're in group work, it's really structured. It's not really friend time. And we wanted to know what's happening for him at lunch. We want to improve his social skills at lunch because we do have an idea that there are some problems. We can sometimes see other kids laughing when he's around. We can see other kids leaving when he's near, but we don't have a really good sense of what he's doing that's making them laugh or leave. So someone says, I think he needs to talk to his peers during lunch. That's a goal. We should have him talk to his peers during lunch. And someone else says, well, I saw him last spring during lunch and he did seem to be sitting nicely with a group of boys. I could not hear what they were saying, but he seemed to be participating. Do we have enough information here to come up with a good goal? Would we just be shooting in the dark? This would be, we would come up with a bad goal if this is the information that we have. This is part of the importance of having a good baseline assessment. So we don't have enough information. What should we do in this case? Would there be any utility in reading some file reviews about lunch period? No, because those don't exist. There are no file records about what he does at lunch period, right? There are no records that would inform us here. Should we interview him? He'd lie to us. I'm having a great time at lunch. All my friends love me. What we're seeing does not match with what you're telling us, right? So he's not a reliable informant. Could we ask the other kids? Maybe. Right? Some of the other kids might be really uncomfortable. Like, why are you asking me this? And if there's any teasing or bullying going on, who's going to own up to that and tell you that that's going on? They're in fear of getting in trouble, right? So interview is really difficult to do. Could you test him on this? Like, let's pretend it's lunchtime. Come sit at the special ed table with me and let's role play. Is that going to be meaningful? No, because he's not going to act the way with an adult in this analog setting that he does in the real world. So observing him at lunch was kind of the best thing to do. And they asked me to observe because I go in about once a month. And so he's not that sensitive to my presence. But any of the other teachers, as soon as the other teachers like walk by his table, he's highly sensitive. He's like, he'll see him clam up until the teacher leaves. And then you'll see him talking again and you don't know what he's saying. You don't know if it's good or bad. And so I became the spy and I just started wandering around the lunchroom and then like trying to stand by the table without looking creepy. Because I'm kind of creepy because I'm that guy who's here once a month and I don't know why. Kind of leaning in. You're talking about the Vancouver Canucks, okay. Oh, you're bragging that you could beat all of the Canucks at hockey because they suck. Oh, right? And so that's how we did our riot. That's how we did our baseline, is we got the Confederate to go in and essentially eavesdrop and spy, which was easier said than done. But we identified that he's doing a lot of bragging and making stuff up. And so now we know what he's doing, and he's getting some reinforcement for that because it's kind of entertaining to the kids some of the time, but the other times they're not into it. They find it annoying, they get tired of it, and they walk away or they laugh at him. And so then the school was able to come up with some goals around appropriate sharing that wasn't bragging, and actually some pull-out social skills he did with the speech pathologist around what bragging is and what other people are thinking about when you say these things and what you could do instead, right? So we were able to get some meaningful goals out of having a better idea of what was going on. So assessing present level. As we have established, in order to generate meaningful IEP goals, we're going to do a bit of an activity now. We need to have an accurate assessment of the student's present level or skill performance. So for each question, check all that apply. Would you do a review of records, an interview, observe, or test? Okay? So let's do this together. You are receiving a new grade 3 student to your school, and you need to establish goals or objectives for her oral reading fluency. Show of hands, could you do record review? Yeah, you could check to see, did anyone at the last school write anything about her oral reading fluency? It's worth checking. And maybe you find something, maybe you don't. Should you ask her parents about this? You could, although you're looking for some data about oral reading fluency that the parents probably aren't sensitive. The parents are going to give more of an anecdote, like, well, she's reading with me. She seems to enjoy it when I read to her. She's filling in some of the words, but that's not the answer to the question, right? And so that's probably not going to be adequate. Could you observe the student? It's kind of weird. Well, really just go straight to test, right? If I want to know what she can do, I'm going to observe her in a test situation. I'm going to do a probe. I might do a dibbles. I might take a grade 3 reader and I might do a little social validity test. I'm going to get a couple other kids in the class to read it and get a sense of how they're doing. And then I'm going to pull her aside and have her read it and see, does she kind of in the ballpark with her friends? This is not empirical, but it's kind of qualitative. Or is she way below and I need to get a grade 1 reader, right? I can do some probing that way. I need to do that before we sit in the IEP meeting and come up with a goal for her, because otherwise we're shooting in the dark, right? You need to establish meaningful social skills objectives around initiating with peers at recess in elementary school. Is a review of records going to work? No, no one takes records of what's happening at recess. Could you interview people? There are staff out there, right? You can go talk to some of the staff and say, what's Johnny doing at recess? What do you see? Could you pay attention and report back to me after a few recess periods? Could you observe? Absolutely, go get eyes on, right? The best way to understand what's happening at recess is to spend a recess, a little probe session, before we talk about the goals in the IEP meeting. Could you test this? No. This makes me think of the difference between knowing and doing and how knowing is a completely useless concept. I worked with a kiddo who at recess, he would go, I think I'm giving away a story I'm going to get to later, but every single recess time, he would hit somebody and have to come in. And he'd be upset that he had to come in, and then from recess to lunch would be a write-off because he was upset that he was brought in early. This was like insanity, because this would happen every single day. And I sat with him, before he went out for recess one day, I kind of hunkered down with him. I said, okay, and this was all about tag, because he was okay chasing, but if he got tagged, he'd turn around and punch the person who tagged him, right? He didn't do tag, or he didn't get tagged. So I talked to him about, okay, what are you going to do at recess? I'm going to play tag nicely with my friends. How are you going to tag your friends? I'm going to do it gently like that. What are you going to do if someone tags you? Because I know you don't like that. What are you going to do? I'm just going to play nicely with them and let them tag me. Good, you've just passed the test, 100%. I open the door, and he goes out and punches someone within minutes and comes back in. I'm like, dude, what did you say? Like, talk is cheap, right? He knows what he's supposed to do and not do, but he's doing the same problem every day. So testing him on it, like giving him this little quiz, was a waste of my breath, right? Because he's not going to adhere to just the talk. So you need to observe. Around establishing initiations at recess, one of my favorite memories is with Matthew. Matthew was in grade 1, I think, and the concern was that Matthew needs to play with his friends at recess. He's not initiating, and so they stipulated on he needs to initiate with his friends, go up and initiate some play. And everyone was saying through interview that he doesn't make social initiations. So that would be a good goal, because this kid just spends the entire recess alone. He does not initiate, based on some reported people who were out on the playground. But we weren't sure if that was totally true. So I went out to observe a recess on a few recesses, and this is what I saw. Matthew was a Star Wars fanatic. So he would go up to a friend and he'd go, and the other kid would look at him like, what's your problem? And walk away. He was unfazed. He'd look for the next person. And that kid would walk away. And he'd look for the next person. And he went around the whole recess doing his lightsaber initiation. Nobody played with him, but he was initiating his butt off, right? The initiation wasn't the problem. His motivation was fantastic. He was trying with what he had available to him. There's one other kid, Jonathan, who is also a Star Wars geek. And every now and then there's the intermittent reinforcement. This is why he persists. Because once a week he'd go up to Jonathan, and Jonathan would be like, and a big smile on his face, right? Jackpot! And these two would run around doing sound effects, right? But that was the minority of the time. And so that was really important, because then at the IP meeting, we could say, look, Matthew is initiating like crazy. He's doing a really bad job of it. We need to come up with a strategy that's not the Star Wars. And so we actually came up with a strategy where he had an allergy, so he always wore a fanny pack with his EpiPen, and that was normal. No one thought anything of that. We put a little vibrating device in his fanny pack, and we did some role pulling. We taught him when it buzzes, no one can see this prompt, but you can feel it. You're supposed to say to your friend, play with me? And we trained him on it, and he did it. And then we put it to work at recess, and he went up to the first kid, and I'm watching with the device, and I buzz him. And he goes up to the friend, and he goes, my bum is tickling. Which is also not a good social initiation, right? So we had to get through the butt tickling. But then that was our strategy. And he started to then vocally say, play with me. And then, sure, I'll play with you. Because the kids liked them. They just didn't know what to make of the lightsaber thing, right? So we need that baseline information. You need to establish functional objectives around grade 1 students' toileting skills. Could you do a review of records? Yeah, maybe. Probably not school records. Maybe they've done any training at home. Could you interview parents about toileting skills? Yeah. Absolutely. Does it mean that what he does at home around toileting is what he'll do at school? No. So there might be no generalization of that. They can give a complete and accurate report of what's happening at home, but it might be totally different at school. I know some kids who are completely toilet trained at home and not at all at school, and vice versa, right? 100% in one and none in the other. So just because something's happening in one setting doesn't mean it's going to happen in another setting. But I would certainly talk to people. Could I observe and test? You'd have to probe this, right? Like, let's just take some data. Let's follow him around. Let's maybe do some dry pants checks. Let's record when he goes to the bathroom. We're gonna have to get some baseline to see what is this kiddo doing around toileting before we come up with a measurable, specific objective. You need to establish a meaningful objective for a grade 2 student's receptive listener picture vocabulary. Could you do a review of records? Maybe somewhere, maybe the speech pathologist has some record of that could help you. Maybe if they worked on it in a home program, if they have a home program. Is there much utility in interviewing? How many things does he know? People are going to be making wild guesses. 1,000, right? It might be 50, right? They might grossly over or underestimate. It's just a shot in the dark. So you typically want to do some type of observe/test, right? If I want to answer this question, I'm just going to quiz you. We're going to do a bunch, right? Here's a picture of the old Peabody picture vocabulary test. I got training from an SLP and doing this for research purposes. I've done a lot of PPVTs. It's old, archaic materials. And now that it's all online, you've got beautiful new pictures. You can do this on an iPad, right? And do the standardized test of picture vocabulary. So you can get a bit more specific, right? And then that will inform better targets, right? He knows 200 foods and animals. Okay, well, what else does this grade 2 student need to be able to identify in pictures? Like, how about his friends? How about functional things, right? This will inform your goals if you know your baseline. You need to establish a functional objective about the student's independence with arrival to school in grade 10. Is there going to be a record about this? Probably not. Could I interview a parent about this? Sure, but you don't know what you're going to get based on perspective because everyone has a different analysis, right? So I might interview the mom and say, is your daughter arriving at school independently? And the mom says, she's completely independent. We're so pleased. Because in the past, mom had to take her by hand and literally hand her off to the SEA. And now mom gets out of the car and walks into the lobby and then walks her walk down. And so from mom's perspective, this is way better. She is independent. From my perspective, you shouldn't have to get out of your car. You should drop her off at the curb and she could get in and go on her own, right? So we have different definitions of what independence is. So if you're going to interview, you need to be clear on those definitions. Is your definition what my definition is? The easiest thing to do would be to just go to school early and watch the drop-off. Okay, I saw what mom did. Ask mom, is this the usual gig? Mom said, yep, this is how we do drop-off. Okay, now I've got baseline for drop-off. And maybe there is no problem here to solve, or maybe we can identify the next evolution that, mom, you don't need to come into the school. You can let her out of your car, right? Or whatever the next evolution is. You need to establish a socially valid goal around taking conversational turns for a grade 7 boy with autism who's going to be going to high school soon. Record review, again, probably not going to be terribly useful here. Could you interview people about conversational turns? Could you interview his adult instructors, his staff at school about this? They're going to report their experiences of conversational turns with him. If you ask his parents, they're going to report on their experience of conversational turns with him, which are probably both qualitatively different than his conversational turns with his friends, what they're talking about and how they're talking about it, right? So interview here probably won't be that good. You'll probably need to go and spy and observe and get a good sense before you come up with a meaningful objective, right? So the punchline message here is, and I think is the first element of our 4 parts of the IEP, we really need to have better baselines. Right? I think we all do some degree of baseline. We often have an anecdotal description. And for long-term goals, an anecdotal description of a present level is usually adequate. But for short-term objectives, you need to have a clear baseline because that's what you're going to compare your progress against. So you need to do your RIOT. So before the IEP meeting where possible, go in and observe these things. If you have a template for the IEP, you know there's specific things you're going to talk about, go check those out, do a classroom visit. And if you don't have the time or resources to do it, could someone else collect that data? Could the SEA collect that data? Could a classroom teacher inform that? And quite often things come up to the IEP that you didn't think about before. And so often immediately after, before you solidify your goals, there should be a to-do list where I have some homework to do or someone has some homework to do. I need to go and observe and do some RIOT assessment before we solidify these goals, right? That's the homework from the IEP based on discussions that came up. So one of the nice things about, one of the bad things about the timing of this workshop at the end of August is that we would have liked more people, but they're on vacation. We have more people on the October Pro-D Day. The great thing about this is that it's about to be IEP season in 5 seconds. The timing of this couldn't be better, right? So you can go into schools with this mandate of I need to do some more assessment, some more rigorous assessment before coming up with goals. And that can start the first week of school.